This is what's wrong with your kid. This is why your kid is struggling in school, is not getting any sleep, having anxiety, and you're thinking about having to put them on medication, which quite often is making the situation even worse. This is what is going on. Welcome, everybody, once again to the Audacious Faith Podcast, episode 117. I want to ask you a question today that maybe you've been asking yourself. Hey, what is wrong with my kids? Why is it that they seem to be lost? I mean, just not focusing, not able to concentrate, distracted constantly. Why is it that they often seem to be sad and don't have that childlike enthusiasm? Why is it that children that should be just out playing and having a great time seem to be moping around, not even knowing what to do with themselves? I've been watching this and seeing it myself. It's much different than even when I raised my kids, and it's definitely much different than when I was growing up. You know, I was thinking back to that just the other day about what it was like to be a child in my era. You know, we didn't have the cell phones. I was just sharing with somebody yesterday about what I'm sure you already know if you're in my generation. The phone would ring and we had no idea who it was. We actually talked on the phone rather than just text. We didn't have anything like FaceTime. We weren't glued to our electronic devices all the time. We actually played with things that we scattered across the floor, and we would go outside and we would play ball and get physical activity, and the whole world was just different. And when we thought about what others might be doing, we wondered, are people meeting? Are people gathering? I won't know until I see them again in school. Now we see it constantly in front of us on social media like billboards. And of course, a lot of it is represented only in the best of lights, and it's not even accurate. Isn't that true? So what does the Bible tell us about our kids? It tells us in Proverbs chapter 22, verse 6, that as parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, family, friends, guardians, teachers, whoever it is, we are to train up children in a way that they should go. It's our responsibility to do that. And it tells us that if we do that, in the end, they will not depart from it. They'll find their way back into that way of life that they have been led and they have been taught. But today there are a lot of influences that seemingly are beyond our control. When I was raising our kids, I know that me and my wife, what we would do is we were careful about some things. There were programs that people were watching and we said, no, you're not going to be watching that. There were movies that people were going to, but with the ratings and what was involved in that movie, we're thinking, no, it's not appropriate. You don't need to be watching that. There were certain shows and there were certain ideas and there were certain music that everybody seemed to like. And we said, no, in our house, you're not going to be doing that. But that was at a time when we could somewhat control it. And I know that we got frustrated at times when those kids of ours would go to somebody else's house and the standards would be different. And things we didn't want them to watch, they watched for hours while they were over there. Things we didn't want them to listen to, suddenly we realized they knew all the lyrics and they knew all the songs. You know, it's like, hey, we're doing our best to kind of control for the benefit of their own mindset, and yet things were creeping in anyways. Well, if you thought that was true back then, 15 years ago, now it is way, way more difficult, because no matter what you're doing as a parent, you have to understand that through devices like this one, and tablets, and computers, there is access, people are gaining access to your children's minds and influencing them in ways whether or not you want to or not. Kids are getting phones at 6, 7, 8 years old. I would caution you about that. There's a lot of stuff that they're getting that you can't control, that you don't want them seeing. Do they really need that phone at 8 years old? Do they really need that tablet with unlimited access to the internet, where people that have ill intentions that you would never allow into your home are coming right into your home through those electronic devices? This is what's happening with kids today. I mentioned it in the introduction. They can't focus. I'm teaching a history class right now in our Christian school. I've got, what age do I have? They're fourth and fifth grade. Fourth and fifth grade. And I tell you, these are some of the same kids, because I've seen it, because I have a couple of kids in my house right now as foster kids. And these are kids that can be talking to each other and be on electronic devices and engaging with one another for hours. I'm not exaggerating. Hours at a time. If you allowed them and you didn't place limits on it, they would be on there for 8-10 hours a day on a weekend, or all throughout the evening. And yet you give them a homework assignment and you want them to read 3 pages and find the answers to the questions. They can't focus. That is very concerning. Very, very concerning. Because everything is quick, everything is images, everything is stimulating. That's what's going on. And these ideas are coming in to your child's life today. Be extremely, extremely careful. Where should they be focusing? What should they be doing? Now, just like you are concerned about their diet, hopefully, and that's a whole other subject that we could handle. In fact, I'll just briefly mention, if your kids are eating nothing but this junk food, all these Doritos and chips and Flamin' Hot Cheetos and all that, you want to take a look at the garbage that you're actually putting into their bodies and what that's actually doing. If they're just filling up on sugar, if they're not getting enough sleep, this is going to completely alter their wellness and their state of being. But even beyond that now, we want to think about this. What is it that they are focusing on? What is going through their minds? Because of social media, you're now seeing 8, 9, and 10-year-olds focusing on things that you and I didn't focus on and think about till we were 16 or 17. And as you think back about that, you would realize, hey, I wasn't ready, and nor would I have been able to handle. I could barely handle those things at 16 or 17. Think about trying to handle those things at 8 or 9 and trying to process that. These are the types of subjects that are now being launched to your children. If not through the public schools, which is another episode that we talked about, way too early on some of these areas, it's being launched through the electronic devices and social media. You've got children, small children, walking around depressed. You've got small children walking around fixating on sexual things and their bodies and things like that, when they should be just out playing and having fun and playing games. You've got children that just want to sleep, or they don't want to rest, or they have anxiety at 8, 9, 10 years old. This should not be the case. And so we've got to really put a cap on that and start changing what it is. It's all about where they're focusing. In Philippians chapter 4, we've looked at this before, but it talks about that anxiety and wrong thinking comes from handling a bunch of things in our head rather than taking everything to God. And the later part of the chapter discusses what it is where our mindset is. Now, this is true for adults. And so if you're an adult listening to this, I want you to take notice. But at the same time, it's definitely true for your kids. It tells us whatever thing is true, whatever thing is honorable, whatever thing is of good rapport, whatever thing has virtue, whatever thing has honor, okay? All of those types of things. It says focus on those things. And when you do, the God of peace will be with you. All right, that's true for us adults, but it's also very true for our children. We want to direct them to spending their energy, spending their mental time on things that have value, things that have virtue, things that are beneficial, things that will actually contribute to their well-being, to their spiritual well-being, to their emotional well-being, and to their greater learning, and to their social networks, being able to connect with people in the right way. What's happening in social media today is mostly nonsense. I've watched kids. You've probably seen some of this. You know what they've talked about, those kids that will spend hours and hours on video games? Okay, that's bad enough. Hours and hours on video games. I was one of those kids, by the way. I could spend hours on video games, which is part of the reason why I don't really play them today. Because I know that even as an adult, I could get back to the point where I would spend hours on video games again, because I don't like to lose. And so it's like one more time. And so before you know it, it's very addicting. All right. Well, it's gotten worse today. Kids, it would be bad enough if they were spending hours and hours on video games. You know what kids do today? They spend hours and hours on YouTube watching recordings of other people playing video games and giving nonsense commentary of the video game while so they're not even playing the game. They're just watching others do it, and they'll spend hours watching this. And it's total nonsense. In fact, if your kid comes in with your tablet and you're trying to do something else in the room and you're hearing this because they don't have headphones on or earphones, you're like, what in the world are you listening to? It's so stupid. And it's just hours and hours. This is all that they're taking into their brain. All right, parents, guardians, whoever it is, this is what's wrong with your kid. This is why your kid is struggling in school. This is why your kid is not getting any sleep. This is why your kid is having anxiety and you're thinking about having to put them on medication, which quite often is making the situation even worse. This is what is going on. All right, so I am recording this video to you as a warning and as a help. Because as a pastor, I'm seeing too many kids who are now teenagers and now adults that don't know how to function, that don't have an attention span, that don't know how to deal with reality, that they have absolutely no pain tolerance, no emotional tolerance whatsoever. It's like an epidemic, and it's even leading to things like severe depression and suicide. All right, this does not need to happen. Take control now. So what are some things you can do? Well, first of all, if you have young children, they don't need a phone. They just don't need a phone. All right, but what about the tablet? Because I see 3-year-olds on tablets for hours. All right, playing games and everything. All right, playing a game or whatever, that's fine. But when it starts being interaction, and if it's too long, let the kid go out and play. All right, let them play in their room. Let them do something. Let them use their imagination rather than have everything just fed to them. The second thing is, if they're going to be on that, if they're going to be on tablets and everything, there's something called parental controls. I discovered these recently. I had heard about them, but I never used them. They're wonderful. They're absolutely wonderful. You can set a time limit. You can set a block. You can monitor. You can see all of this. All right? And if you only want it to be 2 hours a day, or you want it to be less, or you want it to be just a little bit more, then you can set it for that. And it can come to the point where they request more time, and you can deny that. All right? Or if you decide things have been good and other things have been done, you can grant a little bit extra. Here's the temptation that a lot of parents and people do, and I know because I've done it myself. I'll just let them play on the tablet because they're not bugging me. I've got other things to do. I've got other stuff I want to take care of, and that occupies them. It's like babysitting. Fine. At least they're doing that, and then they're not bothering me for something else. And I totally get that because I'm one of those people. But let's consider the damage that's being done. All right? Let's consider that. As it tells us to train up that child in the way that they should go, and in the end they will not depart from it, let's realize that we're being given that direction because God has given us that responsibility. All right. I would be, as we finish up this episode, very curious to hear your input and to hear your comments when it comes to this. If you've been seeing this with your kids, please post a comment below on whatever platform that you're listening to. You can reach out to me, and I'd like your view on this as well. jgothier@gmail.com, jgothier Senior on Facebook, jgothier Senior on Instagram, or the Audacious Faith Podcast on Instagram. There's so many ways to get in touch with us. Make sure you do, please. And if you know of people in your life and you're seeing this happening to the kids and you've been wondering what's going on, please pass this on to those who are responsible for them and share this video as well. We are always grateful for your participation, and we would pray that you would also subscribe to the podcast and share it with everybody you know. This has been, once again, the Audacious Faith Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next time.